Hello, this is Mr. D. Tonicourt, and this lesson is 3.2 on energy, producers, and consumers. So in this part, we'll be talking about how all living things need to obtain energy and use energy to do all of their life functions. Living things need to grow, they need to reproduce, they need to get food, and all of this stuff takes energy. All of the chemical reactions in an organism's body takes energy. So there are different ways organisms can get this energy, and most of the energy for life on Earth, of course, comes from the sun. So we're looking at organisms that we call autotrophs. Autotrophs are organisms that can produce energy either from sunlight or from chemicals. And not only can they produce their own food, but they can provide food for other organisms that eat them. And so that's why they're called primary producers. All right, if we look at organisms that get their light from sunlight, we typically think of plants. And they get their energy from sunlight because they can do photosynthesis. And of course, that's a chemical reaction where we have sunlight being captured by leaves. And there's pigments in the leaves that capture this sunlight. And the sunlight, along with water, which of course the plant will bring up from its roots, and carbon dioxide, which the plant can take in from the underside of its leaves through stomata. The three of these things enter the chemical reaction of photosynthesis, and they produce carbohydrates, which are sugars, and that's what the plant can use for food. And also the plant as a byproduct produces oxygen, and of course the plant will release oxygen from the underside of its leaf back to the atmosphere. So of course that's a benefit to us too. It adds oxygen to the atmosphere. It takes CO2 out of the atmosphere and it releases oxygen. So animals can use this oxygen to breathe, and when animals exhale they release the CO2 for the plants to take in. So it's a nice cycle. Now another way of getting energy and of being a producer is called chemosynthesis. And so these organisms that live very deep in the ocean, this is called a hydrothermal vent, and way down deep in the ocean there's no light, so they're not going to get energy from sunlight. So these bacteria can take chemicals out of the ocean and convert them into sugars in a process called chemosynthesis. And these organisms are called chemosynthetic organisms. And of course the chemical reaction down here, you can see it's sort of similar to photosynthesis. We still have carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, which they're getting from in the ocean, and oxygen. And this chemical reaction will produce the carbohydrates, which is the food source, the sugars, and it produces other sulfur compounds as a byproduct. Now, there are a whole other group of organisms that are consumers. They can't produce their own food. They have to eat other things. And we call these heterotrophs. And there are different kinds of heterotrophs. This consumer right here is eating a fish, and so that would be a carnivore because it's eating meat. Here we have this parrot is an herbivore, and it is eating plant leaves, roots, seeds, fruits, things like that. Here we have a scavenger because it eats dead animals. Here we have an omnivore because it can eat either plants or animals. This is a decomposer. Uh, Things like mushrooms can actually grow on or through their food, and they use chemicals to break it down and decompose it, and then they absorb the nutrients from it. These are large earthworms, and they are known as detritivores because they feed on particles in the soil called detritus. They chew it up and grind it up into smaller pieces, and they extract their energy from that dead matter that's in the soil. Other things that could be a detritivore would include mites, snails, shrimp, and crabs. Now, we like to fit these things into nice little categories of, autotroph and heterotroph and omnivore and carnivore and so on. But the truth is, in nature, they don't always fit neatly into that category. Sometimes when one food source is not available, an animal will have to substitute a different food source. So in general, these terms are useful, but it's not always going to stay rigidly stuck in that format. All right, and that's the end.